Jerre Van Hoose was born in a small plank house in rural northwest Arkansas, and throughout his life lived through some of the fastest changing times in the state's history. A resident of the small Baldwin community east of Fayetteville, Van Hoose grew up on his parents' farm, helping out with chores when needed and attending the local county school with other children in the community. This two-room school had a great impact on Van Hoose, but not as big of an impact as his parents had on him. Both of his parents had high school educations, which was not all that common for the time or that area of the state. His parents helped him understand the importance of education and instilled in him a great love of learning, without alienating him from the rural culture he grew up in. He remembers his mother reading to him and his siblings on the couch after they finished their chores on the farm, and says that this helped him develop a lifelong love of reading. By the time Van Hoose was ready to leave grade school, the state had just passed laws that required all county schools to consolidate with districts that had high schools. This was an effort to help standardize education more thoroughly across the state, and to make higher education much more readily available to students in rural areas. Van Hoose recalls that this was when school buses became a big deal. It was a big deal. Although he planned on attending high school in Fayetteville or Elkins already, he could now go for free, which was a big relief for him and his family. He became involved in a group that would later be known as an audio-visual club. Projectors were relatively new to the classroom, and just like today, students were the ones who jumped on the newest technology with ease. Van Hoose said it wasn't hard to work the projectors, but the teachers put him in charge of them, and even gave him his own office, where he managed all the use of projectors in the school. Growing up on a farm, he learned how to use tools the old-fashioned way, taking them apart and putting them back together. When he started college, he took part in a work-study program at Southern State College in Magnolia, Arkansas, working on their milking operation to help pay his way through their agricultural program. After 2 years here, he completed their program, and he had to transfer to the University of Arkansas back in Fayetteville to finish. Here, he studied and worked odd jobs until he completed his degree in agroeconomics shortly before spending several years serving in the National Guard. At this point, Van Hoose had developed many literacies. He had the ability to read your average, everyday reading materials, he wrote essays throughout school, and letters at work. Everything you'd expect from a public school system in post-war America. However, the literacies gained in his time in the National Guard were what really helped him find a career. While serving, his work involved reading and interpreting graphs and maps. He helped plan artillery routes to essentially make sure everything was aimed at the right people. One of the odd jobs he had worked in Fayetteville was surveying work with a civil engineering firm. His experience in the National Guard provided him with strong experience and a very specific literacy that coincidentally helped him into a higher position at the engineering firm. However, another coincidence exists beyond this. Around this time, state laws were passed that placed stricter requirements on public and private water and waste disposal systems. Suddenly, a massive market opened in the Ozarks, and his firm set out to work with as many small towns as possible. In a similar series of events, Van Hoose's experience in Ozark town discourse communities made him a great negotiator with the representatives of these towns, and his training in agroeconomics helped him to navigate the world of bonds and funding for these waterworks projects. After years of attending city hall meetings and corresponding back and forth between towns and contractors for the engineering firm, Van Hoose decided to run for mayor of Springdale and served that position for 10 years. Van Hoose's experience is far from the typical Ozark life that many may imagine when they think of the area. Ideas of rural towns, banjo players, and moonshiners, totally lost from the rest of the country, often appear in stereotypes of the area. However, as we can see from Van Hoose's literacy history, the lifestyles are just as varied and complicated as those in any other area. These stereotypes harm our way of thinking about literacy by turning everyone's individual stories into one story. It ignores history, culture, and the individual. Looking at Van Hoose's journey through education contradicts ideas about small towns and rural education. Van Hoose was particularly concerned in his interview that no one from his hometown was viewed as being stupid or less valuable because of how they viewed education. He always reiterated that they were good, hardworking people. Many people in this area simply didn't have an economic need for higher education. To write them off as unintelligent hicks is demeaning and wrong. Many made the right, safer decisions by not pursuing higher education when agriculture would provide for them just fine. In addition to this, the area had only just consolidated school districts. Before, it was difficult for young people to attend high school because they would have to pay out of pocket for a public high school if the school wasn't in their district. This helps us see why it is necessary to always look at literacy development alongside the place in which it exists. Just as a person from the Ozarks is an Ozarkan person, their literacy is an Ozarkan literacy. The norms and social situations surrounding the area deeply influence how and why the residents learn to read, and again influence how they are able to employ their literacy skills. This story helps demonstrate why teachers and those who evaluate the public's education must consider the importance of place in regards to literacy. Van Hoose's literacies could not have been learned in the same way in other places, and they certainly couldn't have been employed the same way in other places. The way laws, especially, interacted with his literacy development shows that educators cannot be held so responsible for students' performances. Many students around Van Hoose, because of cultural norms in the rural Ozarks, did not find the same kind of value in literacy and education in general because they did not feel the economic need to value it. The rural area revolved around agriculture and working-class jobs, which didn't require skills learned in academia. Van Hoose's parents set his trajectory away from the life of a farmer by leading him towards more academic aspects of farming. This proved to be very valuable as the economic landscape started to shift. Something to consider from this is the goals of literacy learning. Educators must be focused on providing literacy skills that are relevant to their specific place and time, and that cater to the needs and sometimes local interests of students. One simple example of this that would be relevant now is the teaching of digital literacies. Similarly to the way that Van Hoose was allowed to tinker with the projectors until he understood them, the use of technologies in the classroom could let students focus on what interests them in particular. If a student is interested in video or music editing, then the school could provide for them resources to learn on. If a student is interested in photography, then the same method could apply. Even coding could fall into this category. In addition to giving the students a sense of self-discovery, this also provides them with practical skills that would be economically relevant today. If teachers and curriculum planners worked locally, rather than trying to standardize all aspects of education throughout the country, then students would be much more attached to their literacies and would be able to gain a stronger sense of self through their learning by gaining awareness of who they are from legitimate histories and outcomes rather than those portrayed through stereotypes in the media.